What's going on, Guardians? It's Tizzle here, and in this video, I'm showcasing one of my all-time favorite builds. Back in Forsaken, Middle Tree Arc was the first subclass node that I unlocked on my Warlock so that I could use Chaos Reach because it's just such a cool-ass super. And back then, exotics were really hard to get, and I never looked at the API or anything or watched any Destiny YouTube to see what exotics were in the game or what they did. And I got lucky with one of my first exotic drops after Forsaken being Geomags stabilizers. And I was in love with them from day one. They have since been reworked from their original functionality where you would sprint to top off your super because it was breaking trials in the Crucible. But the duration extension from Chaos Reach has remained. They were pretty useless when they were first nerfed, but then Bungie buffed them by allowing Ionic Traces to give you bonus super energy. So let's look at the perk and break it down. The exotic perk is still called Close Enough, a throwback to the original implementation of them, and it reads, damaging targets with Chaos Reach extends its duration. Collecting Ionic Traces grants you energy for Chaos Reach. So they're pretty simple, and then the Destiny Data Compendium shows us exactly how they work. Chaos Reach gets 10% super ability energy on hit with a 0.75 second cooldown between activation. So as long as you are dealing damage with the super, it will extend the duration. And this can increase the total damage by up to 120%. And then for Ionic Traces, each pickup grants 2% to our super meter. So then if we look at Ionic Traces, they show us that they give 12.5% grenade and melee energy and 15% to our class ability. So this allows us to really spam our abilities if we're making lots of traces, and oh trust me, this build can make a lot of Ionic Traces. The main way we make them is through our first aspect, Electrostatic Mind. Defeating targets with arc abilities or defeating jolted or blinded targets creates an Ionic Trace. This is exceptionally strong with this build as we are constantly defeating enemies afflicted with arc debuffs. And this also makes us amplified, and being amplified helps us to move quicker, but it also gives us better handling on our weapons, which is always welcome. And it buffs our melee ball lightning by making it shoot additional lightning strikes, and it also buffs our next aspect, which is Arc Soul. So whenever we cast our Rift, we create an Arc Soul that shoots a turret, and this turret shoots quicker when we're amplified. This is especially nice in a fire team as our Rift recharges quicker when allies are near us. We get 40% quicker recharge rate with one ally, 80% with two, and 120% with three, and allies will also get an arc turret whenever they pass through our Rift. Onto Fragments, the first one is Spark of Shock. This allows our Arc Grenade to jolt targets, and this is obviously beneficial as we will get tons of Ionic Traces from killing jolted targets. And then we have Spark of Magnitude to make our Pulse Grenade last even longer. Pulse Grenades hit extremely hard, and this just makes them even better. So those are the two I think you must run, and then we have some optional ones. Personally, I like Spark of Recharge. While critically wounded, your melee and grenade energy regenerates more quickly. This procs whenever we're in red health, and it lasts until our shields are restored, and it gives us a whopping 400% increase to our grenade and melee regen. Obviously you don't want to be low health very often, but with no access to things like Devour or Restoration, it is just something that can definitely happen on an Arc subclass. And then we have Spark of Resistance if you want more survivability, as this gives us 25% damage resistance when we're near 3 enemies. If your loadout is built for it, then you can also run Spark of Beacons. This is honestly one of the best fragments in the entire game, as all arc special or heavy weapon kills make a blinding explosion whenever we're amplified. So this one is loadout dependent, but if you have arc specials and heavies on, then it's pretty much a must run. And it pairs perfectly with the new artifact mod in Act 2, Arc Compounding. Arc sources deal increased damage to blind targets. I don't know yet what this damage boost will be, but it's definitely a must run with this build. Spark of Discharge will allow you to create even more Ionic Traces if you want, and Spark of Amplitude will allow you to make even more Orbs of Power, but sadly, it has a 10-second cooldown. If it wasn't for the cooldown, then this would definitely be a good pick. But it still isn't bad, it just depends what you're trying to do. It's too bad we can't run 5 or 6 fragments like Prismatic allows, but I digress. The only other two artifact mods really worth mentioning are Trace Evidence, where rapid precision hits or rapid final blows on targets afflicted by Jolt or Blind will generate Ionic Traces, as this will allow us to double dip on Ionic Traces because we're doing this already. And then when boosted, picking up Ionic Traces grants us Armor Charge. I'm not a big fan of the tonic system, but this one is well worth boosting to get this effect. Because we're making so many Ionic Traces, it pretty much gives constant uptime on Armor Charge. And then we have Retinal Burn, where rapid arc precision hits consume an armor charge to blind the target. This is incredibly strong in endgame content, and then if it's boosted, it will make a blinding explosion, blinding multiple targets instead of just the one. Again, blind is incredibly strong, so this works amazingly. and you can proc it pretty much all the time because you will constantly have armor charge from the ionic traces. And then if you're in a fire team or running a chill clip weapon or something, then Conductive Cosmic Crystal could also be a good idea to run. Your arc abilities and weapons with the Dark Ether Reaper origin trait do bonus damage to targets affected by a stasis debuff. So now you will do increased damage with all of your arc abilities, including Chaos Reach, and a lot of people are running stasis these days. So now your hard-hitting Pulse Grenade and your Chaos Reach will be hitting 5% harder. The damage bonuses increase when boosted, but you can only run one boost, and I highly recommend doing it for Trace Evidence and Retinal Burn. But you do you. Depending on the content, like if it's a boss damage phase, then Conductive Cosmic Crystal would definitely be the way to go. But for general play, the arc mods will give you much more benefit. Onto mods, these crank up the build even further. I like to run Ashes to Assets for more super energy on grenade kills. Again, we are spamming our grenade constantly with this build, so this will give us more super energy, allowing us to use our Chaos Reach more often, and that's the centerpiece of the build. So with that in mind, we also have Font of Wisdom. This gives us plus 30 to our intellect stat, giving us 70 intellect whenever we have armor charge. This takes our passive cooldown from 7 minutes and 11 seconds to 6 minutes and 14 seconds, so shaving almost a minute off. And then I go with Harmonic Siphon so that arc weapon multi-kills will generate an orb of power. And obviously orbs give us more super energy as well. Onto the arms, we want to be spamming abilities as much as possible, so we have Bolstering Detonation and Momentum Transfer to give us Rift and melee energy when we deal damage with our grenade. And then Firepower to make an orb from the grenade kill. On the chest, I just go with the resistance that suits the activity. On the legs, you can truly go with whatever you want. I soloed the Heist Battleground Moon GM using Void Scav and Void Holster, but I was using Deterministic Chaos. But for general play, I would go with the mods where picking up orbs gives you ability energy. So Absolution for a chunk to all our abilities, Innervation for even more grenade energy, and Insulation for class ability energy. But you could also go with Invigoration for a chunk of melee energy. It's your choice. You could also go with health regenerating mods for survivability, but I like to have more abilities personally. And if you wanted to go for damage, then you could run Surge mods or a Scavenger mod for more ammo. The choice is completely yours and depends what you're using the build for. And then on the class item, I go with Bomber for a chunk of grenade energy when I cast my Rift, and then Font of Restoration to give us 30 additional recovery when we have armor charge. This takes the build from 70 recovery to 100, meaning I regen health quicker and I get my Rift back even faster. And as mentioned, this is great as it allows us to have more Arc Souls and proc Bomber more frequently. I was using a time dilation mod to give me 15 seconds instead of 10 on my Font of Wisdom and Font of Restoration, but you do you. You could also run Reaper here instead to make even more orbs. And speaking of orbs, let's look at weapons. Sadly, I still don't have a VS Velocity Baton with Attrition Orbs, but that would be great for this build as it would give you armor charge, big chunks of super energy from picking up all the orbs, and it would weaken targets with Concussive Reload. You could also run a good special arc weapon like the Special Ammo Sidearm and Indebted Kindness with Volt Shot. But for me, the star of the show is Vantage Point with Jolting Feedback. My role has Jolting Feedback and Eddy Current, so it's perfect for this setup. And Jolting Feedback procs a ton. It's perfect in endgame content because it doesn't require a kill, so you just lay into targets with it and proc Jolt. And we have Unstoppable Pulse Rifle in the artifact, so you don't need to worry about the surge as it will always be overcharged. And the Jolt can stun overloads as well, so this weapon can deal with 2 enemy types in just one weapon. It's extremely good. And I touched on the overcharge and surges, but all the background gameplay you're seeing is with Void Surge on. Yes, we had the Savathun's Worm Hunger or whatever modifier on the GM, but in the Lost Sector, it's all just Void Surge, and then the GM was also Void Surge, so whenever it's Arc Surge, you're going to be dealing 25% more damage with all your Arc abilities. So the Nightfall gameplay is a little skewed because of that Worm's Hunger modifier, but still, you get your abilities like crazy with this build. But back to weapons, I like to run Lost Signal for an Area Denial GL in the kinetic slot, as this can weaken targets thanks to Concussive Reload, but it would also pair nicely with Chill Clip Rake Angle or the upcoming special Stasis Sidearm from Iron Banner to Nash's Mastery. That thing is going to be an absolute beast, and it too can deal with overloads and unstoppables. But if you want to run an Arc Primary, just pick any that has Jolting Feedback or Volt Shot. And then in your heavy slot, you can run what you like. I love a good Arc Machine Gun or the new Grenade Launcher, which I still don't have the God Roll for, Bittersweet. Also want to shout out some very strong exotics to pair with this build. Darcy can apply Jolt on hits, so that's very good. Grand Overture is an absolute monster, and its Missile Volley can blind targets. Queenbreaker can blind on hit, Centrifuge can blind enemies, and Coldheart can make a ton of ionic traces, and being a special with loads of ammo, it pairs amazingly with Spark of Beacons to blind everything. And lastly, we have the mighty X-Dearest. This thing is a beast, and being a GL, it is very good with Concussive Reload and Overload Grenade Launcher. And it can blind from the Moth or Spark of Beacons, so it has utility against Unstoppables as well. For the stats for the build, 100 Resilience for the damage resistance is a must, and then 100 Discipline. Then as much recovery as you can get, and then whatever else you like. And finally, I just want to show off the fashion on my Geomags build. It's simple being all one color palette, but I think it goes extremely hard. Anyways, that's it for the video. If you're still watching, thanks so much for watching to the end, it means a lot. And if you want more awesome Destiny 2 content, be sure to subscribe. I've been busting my ass lately making some insanely strong builds, and I can't wait to bring them all to you. They go super hard, so you don't want to miss these. I'll catch you in the next video. Take care.